Leo was a painter of forgotten things, rain-slicked alleyways, wilting flowers in chipped vases, the tired faces of strangers on the morning train. His canvases were brilliant but unseen, gathering dust in the corner of his cramped apartment. His desperation was a physical ache, a constant companion that led him into the cluttered gloom of a back-alley antique shop. It was there he found it. Not in a velvet-lined box, but tossed in a grimy tray of mismatched cufflinks and tarnished tie pins. It was a ring of blackened pitted silver, cradling a piece of obsidian so dark it seemed to drink the light from the room. It cost him the last of his grocery money. Back in his apartment, the moment the ring slid onto his finger, a coldness unlike any winter chill seeped into his bones. The air grew heavy, and a voice, dry as rustling parchment, slithered not into his ears, but directly into his mind. "I am Zarthus. I am the prisoner of the stone. You are my keeper for now. You have one wish. Speak it, and be done." There was no puff of smoke, no grand apparition, just the oppressive presence and the voice that felt impossibly ancient and weary. Leo, heart hammering against his ribs, didn't hesitate. The words tumbled out, born of years of frustration. "I wish to be the most celebrated artist of my generation." The cold in his marrow intensified for a heartbeat, then vanished. The voice went silent. Nothing happened. A wave of foolishness washed over him. He'd just spent his last dirhams on a piece of junk and hallucinated a conversation with it. He sighed and turned to a blank canvas, the familiar despair settling back in. But this time, his hand moved differently. The brushstrokes were not his own. They were confident, frenzied, guided by an unseen force. He didn't paint the bowl of fruit on his table. He painted the space between the fruit. He painted a shadow in the corner of the room that twisted into a gaunt, elongated figure with too many joints in its limbs. The painting was magnificent and utterly terrifying. He finished it in a single night and collapsed into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. The next day, a gallery owner who had rejected him 3 times before happened to walk past his apartment as Leo was carrying the trash out, saw the canvas through the open door, and stopped dead. By the end of the week, the painting, titled Corner Dweller, was sold for an astronomical sum. The art world was ablaze. Leo was an overnight sensation. His wish had been granted. And then the horror began. It started subtly. He would catch glimpses of the corner dweller out of the corner of his eye, a flicker of impossible anatomy vanishing as he turned his head. Then he began seeing other things. A woman with a face made of cracked porcelain would sometimes be his reflection in a shop window, her silent, shattered mouth gaping in a scream. A man whose skin seemed to ripple like disturbed water would stand across the street, watching him with eyes that were perfect, black voids. They were his muses. He painted them with frantic, obsessive energy. His new works were hailed as groundbreaking depictions of psychological torment. "He paints the human condition's darkest fears," one critic wrote. They didn't know he was painting reality. His reality. The ring never left his finger. It felt colder now, a permanent brand of ice on his skin. He realized the djinn hadn't given him talent. It had shattered the veil between his world and another. He was seeing the echoes of past wishes, the tormented souls of those who had worn the ring before him, their own desires twisted into eternal, nightmarish punishments. He saw a king whose wish for eternal life had turned him into a conscious, screaming statue in a forgotten garden. He saw a lover who wished for her partner's return, only to be forever followed by his water-logged corpse. These were his subjects. He was their chronicler. His nights were sleepless. Whispers crawled from the obsidian stone, fragments of forgotten languages, and the soft, wet sounds of weeping. The figures grew bolder. The porcelain woman would trace her cracked fingers on his bedroom window, leaving no print. The waterlogged man would stand at the foot of his bed, dripping brackish water that never pooled on the floor. He tried to stop painting. He locked his supplies away, but his hands would shake uncontrollably, his mind screaming with the visions until he gave in. The compulsion was absolute. He tried to paint a sunset, a field of flowers, but his hands betrayed him, twisting the beautiful image into something monstrous. The petals of the flowers became grasping, skeletal fingers. The warm hues of the sunset bled into the colors of a bruise. The final exhibition of his work was called Viscera. It was his magnum opus, a gallery filled with the portraits of the damned. Critics and patrons walked through the room with hushed awe, praising his unflinching genius. Leo stood in the center of the room, impeccably dressed but gaunt, his eyes sunken and darting. He wasn't looking at the wealthy patrons or the flashing cameras. He was looking at the real subjects of his work, who stood beside their portraits. The corner dweller was hunched near the ceiling. The porcelain woman was weeping in a far corner, and a dozen others lingered in the crowd, invisible to all but him. An interviewer approached him. "Mr. Dane, your ability to conjure such raw, primal fear is unlike anything the world has ever seen. What is your secret?" Leo looked at the man, but his eyes focused on the new figure standing just behind the interviewer's shoulder, a tall, thin entity made entirely of smoke and smoldering embers, its head slowly turning to fix its gaze on him. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than any ghost, that this was Zarthus, the djinn itself, finally showing its form. He felt a cold, dry whisper in his mind, the first he'd heard since he made his wish. The secret. Zarthus's voice echoed in his skull, layered with the silent screams of 1,000 other wishers. Is that the gallery is never full. Leo opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was the most celebrated artist of his generation, and he had a new portrait to paint.